Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Yet another excellent episode. Today we're going to be speaking with Timothy Wyllie about his books, Rebel Angels in Exile, as well as The Revolt of the Rebel Angels. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call, send me an email, and we can set up a one-on-one private consultation from the comfort of your own home. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And I have to tell you, thank you to everyone who has either purchased or downloaded a copy of my recent video, Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients. I just feel honored and blessed by all of the support that I've been getting in this project. And if you haven't gotten your copy, please go to Amazon.com and you can get the digital download version there. Or if you actually want to get a DVD, you can go to my site, soulhealer.com, and get the actual real hard physical copy. And we do have some specials going on there right now, so please check it out, soulhealer.com. Let me tell you a little bit about Timothy Wyllie, and we are going to get him on the air. In the late 70s, Timothy began a systematic exploration of out-of-body state, which led to an invitation to contact with non-physical beings that continues to this day. As a musician, Timothy has made several tapes of what he calls boson music, as well as a series of guided visualizations and meditation tapes. Timothy travels frequently to give lectures and seminars and is the author of The Revolt of the Rebel Angels, The Future of the Multiverse, as well as Rebel Angels in Exile, as well as Wisdom of the Watchers, which is going to be coming out soon. So please welcome Timothy Wyllie. Hey, Timothy, how are you?
Hey, Dr. Rita, thank you. That was a very splendiferous introduction. Thank you.
Well, you know, we have to get everything included. Everything. I'm going to start here. The last time you were on the show, which was, well, it was quite a while ago, actually. You know, I kind of didn't understand where you were coming from. With your material, and I'm going to say I get it now. So I would like to, with your permission, that we just kind of start over again and start at the beginning and then move forward into the information in the Revolt book and possibly the Rebel Angels in Exile. How does that sound?
Well, it sounds like a massive task. The problem is, of course, always to know where to begin, isn't it?
Well, I have questions, Timothy. I always have questions.
Yes, that's true. Well, I suppose I should begin with a near-death experience that I had in 1973, which shook me to absolutely rigid. I mean, it completely changed my life. because not only was I healed of what I was dying of at that time, but I also met angels, and I was given the choice to return to this life or to continue. And I chose to return. I sometimes regretted that decision, but not really. No, it was the right thing to do, put it that way. So that really, of course, that to have something like that, we're suddenly confronted by a whole other world that obviously, is somehow very close to this one and cares very deeply about us as individuals. I was told that I had completed what I had come to do. And that's a very interesting concept in its own right, that each of us have something that we have come to do. It's a deep idea. And it also presages, the fact that we have come from somewhere, which I think is probably, something which we need to consider. And we're also going somewhere, which I think if people took that a little more seriously, they might consider behaving a little better. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that one. So that was me in 1973, coming out of a near-death experience, absolutely exhilarated, and determined from that point on, really, to start an exploration of these realms. But it does take some time. It took me about 7 years to really assimilate, the experience. It was a very deep one. And within about 7 years, I'd always been interested in dolphins and dolphin intelligence. And out of the blue, I was invited down to Florida. And I had a chance to swim for about two weeks with a pod of coastal dolphins. They kind of adopted me in a funny kind of way. I had wanted to ask them questions, so I had sort of memorized what I call sort of 5 telepathic questions, because I had a sense that they were telepathic. I'd seen enough of them and felt enough around them to know that they had some sort of telepathy going. And there, over those 12 or 14 days, they set out to answer those 5 questions, which, of course, in their own very subtle way. I mean, they didn't say anything, but they put me through the hoops, and they showed me things. And, I'd ask them, since you know the water so well, and we know that extraterrestrial vehicles go in and out of the water, seen going in and out of the water, what do you make of it? Now, they didn't answer that directly, but on the last day that we were there, the last evening, we had this magnificent display of lights in the sky, over about a 25-minute period, quite obviously, something completely out of the ordinary. And then, went back to New York, and with a couple of weeks, there was a flying saucer flying over New York City, as just the most archetypal vision of a flying saucer you could imagine. And a little guy, maybe about 10 years, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, with a slightly foreign accent, wandered up to us, and the 3 of us were out in the park, and we were all looking up at it. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that, that's just a star car." Now, I hadn't heard the word star car used in 1981. So, well, what's a star car? He said, "Oh, it's a 1 or 2 person craft used by explorers," and, very lackadaisical tone about it. And my goodness, I started to really get that he was in touch, and I managed to sit him down and, spend the next 20 minutes asking him all sorts of questions about life in the universe. And out it all came. Yes, there are a few aggressive planets, but we tend to leave them alone. He said, "Oh, the film we saw on this planet was 10,000 years ago." And another time he said, oh goodness, I can't remember exactly what that is. It forms the substance of one of my first books, anyway. So this is starting to really blow my mind. I mean, I'm an architect, I'm a fairly hard sort of Britain kind of guy. And here my mind is sort of being blown by these sort of incremental processes. And then, as if that wasn't enough, within 2 weeks, some friends up in Canada phoned to say that they had been in contact with angels that an angel had broken through one of them when he was in a kind of mild trance. And I said, well, that's very interesting. I hadn't heard about that. And of course, I'd seen angels in my, my near-death experience. So, that was interesting. So then we went up there and then had a chance to spend another couple of weeks talking to, a group of angels. Very interesting. So that's really what started it all. And, through the 80s, I got more in contact with the angels. A companion and I and another friend wrote a book called Ask Your Angels, which was fairly formative, I think, in that whole, the angelic thing that kind of broke through in the 80s and 90s. But then I started getting more interested again in other aspects. Who are these angels? What are they up to? Do we share a planet with them? Are they as good to us as we think they are, or we believe they are? So that got a whole sort of level of investigation going.
Well, and then let me ask this question: angels or extraterrestrials? How would you define them, or are we talking about two different things?
Yeah, we're talking about two different things. Yes, I mean extraterrestrials. Let's keep it simple anyway. Extraterrestrials are much like us. They're beings on other planets. Some are more advanced, some are less advanced. The ones that are much more advanced, and some of them get into space travel, some of them don't get into space travel. Some of them get interested in other planets, some of them don't. It's very hard to get off a planet if you're still in a very aggressive mode, that's for sure, because it takes an awful lot of organization and sanity and sensible behavior in order to be able to travel in space or dimensionally. So I think the easiest way to look at it, Dr. Rita, is there is a massive division in between what we would call the outer worlds, and these are the worlds of, knock on wood, the physical world that we can see through our telescopes and all that. And then there's the inner worlds that we contact through our imaginations. Now, we have a rather crude understanding of what our imagination is. We think it's to do with imaginary things, but it's much more complex than that. Of course, we can use our imagination to imagine things, but we can also use our imagination as a sort of two-way glass plate almost, to accept images from the other side and to project images onto it. And so that becomes a very useful tool for, starting to work in these realms. So that's the inner world. And the angels basically administer the outer world, right? So we could say that extraterrestrials have angels too, and some of them, of course, don't know about our angels, as we don't know about our angels, because it's our business, to be mortal, to work out our lives with diligence down here. And same for the extraterrestrials. Now, some of them are much more advanced, and they're I doubt if they would even bother with, this dimension. Because it gets much more complicated when we start to talk in terms of dimensions. You see, our science hasn't yet reached a point of understanding that dimensions are stacked. It's more like an onion, and we live in one, this is the onion, and there's another to the onion, and there's the onion around that. And there's a much more understandable way to view the way these extraterrestrial and angelic sort of situations sort of work out. I think it's a very important division to understand and to make.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that happened to you is that you met, and I'm going to put this in quotation marks, and we'll get into this piece in a little while, but you met a fallen angel named Georgia. So I'm going to assume her story. How did you meet her, and how did that relationship develop?
Well, I could tell it to you from the point of view of how I experienced it in the course of my life, or I could kind of summarize it. I think I'd better summarize it. What I didn't know is I was born in 1940 in the Battle of Britain, and we moved, but we were still under the bombs. And my first memory was at the age of 2, 1, 2, 3, with these bombs dropping. And I was, of course, at a wood table with projectiles, from a doodlebug, as we used to call them. But, of course, I still had a little intelligence in my 2-3-year-old body. And I would compact and compact and compact, and that would pop me out of my body. And what I found 50 years later was that when I was out of my body, I would be held and comforted by an angel. Right? I'd known this for maybe about 30 years, I guess, before I knew who the angel was. And then when I was in my 40s and 50s, I started getting approached by an angel I hadn't recognized. I had pretty good contact with my own companion angels, and I had a number of other angelic contacts, and I would write with angels. We had an angel that helped us with our After Angel book, called Abigail, and she would speak to all three of us. She would kind of coordinate our material. Interesting process that she worked through. But this is another sort of quality, this particular. So I started sort of getting in touch rather cautiously, because I pretty quickly picked up. I knew by this time about the Lucifer rebellion. I knew how it affected this planet. I knew that there were an enormous number of angels who also identified with the rebellion, and I knew that they had been kind of swept aside. So one of the questions I had asked is, well, what happened to all these fallen angels? We're told that they were put on prison planets. Well, what's a prison planet? Is this a prison planet? But anyway, this process probably took 10 to 15 years of getting to know each other and trust each other. Because, to trust a fallen angel, it took quite a bit. But of course, she is absolutely trustworthy. I found out over the course of our relationship, and she had to trust me, because what I didn't know is that she had a plan. And what she didn't know about me was that, what she may have known actually, is that I had always wanted to write a really detailed and understanding and emotionally interesting piece about the Lucifer rebellion. Right? What was that about, and how did, all that. It was just something interested me. I had at least 3 goes at it, and I just couldn't find the voice in about 3 or 4 years. But then when Georgie came up, what it came down to is she said, listen, I've been here for 500,000 years, all right? I was present all the way through. I was present for rebellion. I was one of the rebel angels. I've been on this planet, and I viewed another 4 or 5 other planets as well. I want to tell my story. I want to look at it. I want to know what went wrong. This was a splendid rebellion. This was a revolution for freedom and closeness, and it just went wrong. It all went wrong, and she wanted to know what went wrong. And I said to her, well, this is wonderful, because this is pretty much what I wanted to write, but you've got a much better viewpoint.
Much better advantage view on it, yeah.
But I said, let's make a bargain. I said, why don't you write my story, my little story, right? From your point of view. You see, you've been with me not only in this lifetime, but for the past few lifetimes. You write my story. Tell me all the things that I don't know, that I didn't see, that all the things that were going on behind my back. That'll keep me interested. And 8 volumes later, I'm exhausted. Absolutely exhausted. But we got 8 volumes to go, and 4 of which have come out, or is coming out. This is coming out next year. And I really hope that your publisher will take the remainder. It's a hell of a story.
Well, and talk about this Luciferian rebellion. I mean, when people hear the word Lucifer, they automatically think bad and evil and the devil. And I mean, is that what we're talking about, or what are we talking about here?
To delve into these realms, one really has to let go of preconceptions, of what one's been told, or what one has, been told to believe, or other people's understandings of things. One has to really go in as far as possible as a blank slate. Not to lose one's, ability to discern, of course, and to test everything, but to go in without any attitude, I don't even know if the name Lucifer, where did that come from? Lucifer, light bearer, Lucifer. I mean, who knows what the name really was? But about 203,000 years ago, the capital planet on the inner planes, the inner, worlds I've just been talking about, the capital planet of this local system. The local system's only 1,000 inhabited planets, and this local system only had about 650 inhabited planets at the time of the rebellion. And the rebellion was basically formed by the two organizing angelic principles, the bosses of the angels who take care of these, 1,000 planets. And it's quite a significant piece of real estate. But compared to the vastness of the multiverse, of course, it's really a pretty local phenomenon. But it's an important one because the universe runs very well. And to have a rebellion is a pretty, it's a pretty strange thing. In fact, they tell us that there's only been, I think, 2 or 3 previous rebellions in the last 4 billion years in this sector of the universe. So, it's a pretty significant thing, but not an overbearing thing. But it's also, if you think about it, in a well-organized system, how do you make it better? If things are running well, how do you make it better? And basically what you do is you organize a rebellion of some sort, a revolution, and that gets everything going, and everything gets thrown up in the air, and everything sort of settles, hopefully, slightly better. And this particular process is the end of this massively long process in which our planet and another 36 planets were isolated. We were cut off from the extraterrestrials. We were cut off from knowing more about the angels and everything like that. We said, okay, you're on your own. All right. You wanted to be more responsible. Here you are. You're on your own. And we've been struggling along now for longer than many human history, almost 3,000 years. I mean, it's an awful long time. And, of course, we're much older than conventional science believes us to be. I mean, we were around pretty much intelligent human beings about 1 million years ago, as opposed to wobbling around on the desert 250,000 years ago. So, we've been around a fair amount of time. And the original intercession, right, by the prince's staff, basically was an intercession 500,000 years ago. That's when Georgia joined this planet. And that was basically intercession from the inner worlds, right, manifested here in the outer worlds to kind of upgrade the local population. So you can understand.
Well, and when you're talking, it makes me think of, Star Wars, and there were the rebels that were fighting the Empire, the Emperor, and like Darth Vader worked for the Emperor and Luke was part of the resistance. So if, let's say that the rebel angels, these Luciferians were, with Luke and Han Solo and that whole group, then there's the Emperor that they're fighting against. So what's going on? So there's this rebellion that happened here against this bigger organization. What was going on in the organization that they were fighting, I guess?
No, that's a very good, very deep question. And just on the Star Wars thing, yes, I think you can look through, literature, you can look through films, and you can see lots and lots of resonances, lots and lots of this particular resonance happening and again and again down through history, the very sort of, solid, if you like, despotic administration, it inspires a rebellion. Now, in this case, of course, it's much more subtle. It wasn't sort of guns and warfare and, things like that. It was more to do with a revolution of ideas. The multiverse authority basically had its ways of going about things, I mean, obviously it's been there for yonks, and it must have overseen, a zillion inhabited planets. So it had a pretty good idea of what it was doing. Now, in all these situations, and I mean, you find it down here, when you get a centralized authority, the people on the outside often get a feeling that the centralized authority doesn't really care about them. And what's more, they know more about what's going on than the centralized authority ever does. So that really was the bone of the issue, that we're down here, we know what's going on, and, things are moving too slowly. We need to move this thing along a bit. I mean, there's many layers to it, much more complex than that, but it was more to do with giving more freedom of choice to both angels and to human beings, that they are capable of being more responsible. Now, that may have been a misunderstanding. We weren't quite as responsible as we were supposed to be, but of course we can't really judge that because we have been, wallowing around in the mire of misunderstandings and under this, impossible sort of governing system, for ages. And literally, we're really just coming out of it. And we can't go on much longer, put it like that. I mean, we've almost wrecked the planet.
And so, you've talking about, these angels and Lucifer. So I'm going to make the leap and say that, this is tied to the story of the fallen angels. And then would that be, this is kind of a two-parter, connected to the whole concept of the Watchers that we find, I would think, in the Book of Jubilees?
Yes. The difficulty with those books is that they strive to compress an awful long time into a rather short period. So, the Watchers become monsters, become...
My thought is they have a lot of whiteout, and they just take out the parts they don't like and don't think people should know about, and then it's all good.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've all got their opinions and they've all got their agendas. And as long as one can decode the agenda, you can kind of read between the lines. The Watchers, certainly weren't those entities that appeared, I think, in that film. I didn't see that film, but apparently there was a film recently that portrayed Watchers as these enormous creatures. But no,
that was Noah.
No, yes, I shouldn't.
Actually, I have to tell you, Timothy, I was shocked that they took that story narrative and included the Watchers, which is probably why Noah didn't do very good, because they took a more apocryphal approach to telling the Noah story versus the straight biblical approach.
Yes, I know it was fairly revolutionary. I should see it at some point, but I don't go to the movies.
It's on Netflix, just saying.
Well, language to me, I'm afraid. But yeah, I think that what I understand of the Watchers are they were the angels who identified with the Lucifer rebellion, who were present on the planet at the time that the rebellion struck, and who weren't taken away. All right. What Georgia makes it clear is that she and a number of her friends, were kind of left here in many ways. She's not quite sure why. She was picked out, although as the years roll by and as she gets to know herself and why she's here and everything like that, it becomes a bit more clear that she's quite a specimen, very articulate and questioning, an interesting personality. I've gotten to know her fairly well over the years now.
So when you communicate with her, this isn't on my list, but this is just a personal question. When you communicate with her, is it, do you see her? Is it that what is that interface like for you?
It's entirely done on the emotional, spiritual bodies, the feeling bodies. I don't see her. I feel her. When we work together, it's quite interesting. I have been a channel in my time. I don't stand by it a great deal. I've done automatic writing. I enjoy that. But I don't regard myself as particularly psychic in that way. And as a writer, I enjoy collaborating rather than taking dictation, And I remember when I was writing my first book, an angel did come to me and said, look, you can write this on your own, or, we can dictate it to you. And I said, oh, no, I want to write this on my own, thank you very much. And then over the years, I think that certainly the last 6 or 7 books I've written have all been collaborations with angels. So how George and I work, it is that, I'll do my little prayer, I'll sit in front of the computer. I used to do it long-handed, but now I can do it on the computer. Sit in front of the computer, invoke her, and then, she'll make her presence felt, and we'll pick up on where we left off. she'll come up with maybe a statement, maybe a paragraph, maybe 2 lines. We'll jiggle it around together. I may ask her a question to clarify it a bit or something like that. So it's very much a collaboration. That's what the great fun of it is. It's like sitting there with a very knowledgeable person, and jabbering away with them and trying to get down, the best way that we can express ourselves together. That's fascinating.
One of the things that you mentioned was that the rebellion was 203,000 years ago.
Correct.
What was going on the Earth? And so, and I'm just going to take this from, 203,000 years, we weren't Homo sapiens sapiens. I guess we were Homo sapiens, so we were pretty human-like. But what was going on prior to that, or what was Earth like prior to the rebellion? Have you gotten any insights regarding that? And however far back in time,
yes,
that's really
what the book is about. The book starts at 500,000 years ago. Yes, you see, Homo sapiens, what we've come to believe is the human being. It's only one strain. There were a number of strains as we're starting to discover. Those little guys out in that were discovered fairly recently.
The little hobbit guys?
Yeah.
And in the Philippines or whatever area.
That's right. And they're still over here. They've been discovering giants for years, and of course it's been suppressed. Apparently they've got whole galleries full of them, these giant skeletons in one of the museums that they keep under wraps because it would upset everything. So, of course, if this Homo sapiens is just one strain, there are a lot of other strains, and a lot of other strains started a lot earlier. So there were intelligent beings, wandering around the planet, 500,000 years ago, making their, getting their stuff together. It wasn't really that sophisticated, but they were, good, open-hearted people. And so this, 500,000 years ago, we get this intervention. They come here, and they basically, just gradually sort of help with the cleanliness, better avoid this, or, helping with how to deal with water and things like that. Mainly in the Middle East, but there are other things going on as well. But then, when the rebellion struck, things really started happening because there was a big break, a schism, if you like, in the local authority, and one group came all the way across the Silk Road, for instance, and then they were the guys who basically colonized I'm sorry, the word is Lemuria. Yes, of course, the Lemurian islands. They weren't a continent; they were a whole train of islands, all stretching up, basically pretty much over the Ring of Fire on that side of the Pacific, and that became from about 170,000 years to about 100,000 years ago, a very, very sophisticated society, which of course disappeared as well as advances, but much more recently. So we've got this long history that really kind of gets going, as I said, about 500,000 years ago. And Georgia tells her story. She tells it how she saw it.
Did the Empire, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it in Star Wars term because I'm really not sure what to call them. Did the Empire have problems with them intervening on Earthlings' half? I'm not going to say humanity because we're talking about a number of different creatures. So on Earth's behalf, and teaching them things, giving them fire, teaching them about agriculture. Was that part of the whole rebellion?
No, that happened earlier. that was basically what was happening about 500,000 years ago. I won't say, they introduced fire or anything like that. I mean, they helped out, I think, in a more, in a slight, I think the humans at that point in time certainly had fire, put it that way, certainly had tamed fire. I don't think they needed anybody else to teach them how to do that. But there was a lot to do with, how to, handle game, the whole range of things that you can certainly imagine. Another culture coming in, a mature culture coming in and helping out a primitive culture, and doing it responsibly and well. But what happened, of course, is that over that long period of about 300,000 years before the rebellion, is that things got very, very dragged out and slow, and humans, humans are a pretty terrified species, to tell you the truth. I mean, we've come from a very sort of difficult past, but also, there's a lot of predation on this planet. Most planets don't have quite so much predation as we have. And, coded into us, as things leap out at us and eat us if we're not careful. So, we have a lot of fears we have to deal with. And unfortunately, fears do block communication with the more subtle realms, because fears lodge our consciousness in ourselves. We worry about ourselves, we're concerned with ourselves. Are we good enough? Are we clever enough? All that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that prevents that clarity that I was talking about, that clean stamp, that clean glass that's necessary to be able to sort of embark on these sort of realms.
So they didn't have a problem with that. I think that's interesting. Okay. So prior, all right, I'm like wanting to know the beginning. So prior to the 500,000 years, we were pretty much left on our own, and I'm just going to throw out a question, and you can kind of look at me weird or, listen to me weird. I mean, do you have any understanding of the development of the planet in the first place, whether it was, what's the word? Where they seeded the earth, whether they came, and I like to say, and started to terraform the earth so that creatures and life could start on it. Do you know if that was part of their agenda as well?
Yes.
Back in that billions of years ago time frame?
Yes, I do. But I should say at this point that over the course of my life, I've done a lot of investigations into different cosmologies, different ways of looking at the universe, different ways of understanding the universe. And I came to a very substantial book called the Urantia book, which is over 2,000 pages. It's very, very substantial. And maintains it is actually communicated through human beings from the angels, because it was needed. Now, that sounds pretty improbable, but what is interesting about it is that when one starts to read it, you realize pretty damn quickly that this isn't human. This is something else. This is another intelligence. I mean, it's not necessarily a better intelligence, but it's a very different intelligence if one's using it. I've read a great deal, so I'm used to hearing other people's voices, and I could tell there's something very substantial here. And of course, it is. It's a marvelous, marvelous book. And it does give the history of this planet from the start. And it's very clear about it. Yes, this planet was seeded with life. And it's seeded from the inner planes, right? And then it's seeded in 3 different places, right? And then the seeds develop, and then evolution comes out of that whole process. And it's not interfered with. This is very interesting. They're not really permitted to interfere with evolution once it's started. Right? Now, from the very early days, maybe about around about 1 million years ago, there was something called seraphic over-government. that is an overcomer that is basically responsible for the various angels who take care of kind of the angels of the future, the angels of the churches, the angels of education. The various angels who kind of very gently sort of push things along in the right direction, right? So they basically take care of it. But there's not much need for angels in those early days because people are just kind of fumbling around, really, eating things and trying to stay alive. Things get more interesting, 500,000 years ago, when things start sort of getting a little more advanced. But one of the problems was the angels who were taking care of this particular planet all sided with Lucifer, and that, of course, made the situation even more complicated. So that's where the situation rests at the moment, and we're just sort of embarking ourselves out of it.
Well, and it seems like, you made the comment that it was easier a long time ago, because we were just kind of fumbling around. But it seems to me that animals, or plant life or whatever, listens to its intuition, goes with the vibe on the planet. You know what I mean? There's a connectedness where I could see for humanity, once we got our sense of self, I guess would be the phrase I would use, and our quote unquote free will, that it would become a whole lot more of a problem because they might be trying to nudge us along and we're like, I don't want to do that.
Well, yeah, that's certainly true. Life is a battle. I mean, essentially, if we think of life as being a sort of a university, being at university for a lifetime, put it that way, it's a learning curve. We have to make mistakes in order to understand how to do things right. That's why error exists, basically, in order that one can understand oneself and understand other people and one's relationship to other people in order to, do the right thing as opposed to do the wrong thing. And it's a long process, and thank God, we have reincarnation, when I first saw, I was shown my previous incarnations, what appalled me was how many of them there were. And there were hundreds of the damn things, so it also takes quite a long time to get off this plane. But, a lot of us are here anyway to help things along, so it's a key period. Come on.
There are a lot, you're talking about reincarnation, and there are a lot of people that make this statement. I'm sure you've heard this before, that the Earth is a school in the third dimension. Do you agree with that comment based on your understanding of the universe and the multiverse? Is that your understanding of what is actually happening here, on planet Earth, that we have to live through, and exist in this limited existence, that it is a school? I mean, obviously, we're going to learn from everything that we do and we interact with, but that is the focus of the Earth and planets like this, is that it's we get to learn in the third dimension through limitation.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a very extreme version of planets, too. I think we're quite unusual in that respect. I'm told that we're third to worst out of the 1,000 planets in the segment. So it's a challenge. But if you just sit under a tree and get stoned and look at the ocean, you kind of don't really learn very much. It's only when you're faced by antagonism, you're faced by different ideas. You have to bend to other people's ideas. All this is a whole sort of way of learning to be, because life goes on. And, our education goes on. I mean, tremendous long way in the ascension process. It takes a long time to get out of this local universe, for instance. It's a local universe.
All right, so now I'm going to ask a question that's totally not related to anything that I read in your book, but it seems like you have a pretty good understanding of this. So when we leave, and so let's say we get done reincarnating on this earth and we do ascend to a higher spiritual vibratory plane, do you think it's going to seem like, okay, so now we're not on earth anymore, we've just moved to some other location because it will become normal for us to be in this other plane of existence? Like we don't like hit nirvana? I'm waiting for nirvana, Timothy.
Well, you have to wait a long time, or feel it right now. It's right there. Yes, I've no doubt it will feel perfectly normal. The Tibetan Bardo situation actually is pretty much how it is. There are a number of levels immediately beyond. They say 7, and I have no argument with that. I do know the first 2 are called compensatory realms. And what that means is that, if one's had a particularly exhausting life, a strifeful life, you might have a wonderful or heavenly time, in one of those compensatory realms. And if you've been gouging other people and being a terrible person, you might well find yourself in a reality in which you have to experience what you put out last time around. So that would be maybe a hell, something like a hell realm. Of course, hell in a classical sense is a complete delusion. It doesn't exist. It's an awful idea. Even to consider that a God might conceive of it, just an absurd idea. So, but there are hell realms, and there are heaven realms. In fact, in one of my near-death experience, I was taken to one of the heaven realms, although I still don't remember anything about it, and I haven't remembered anything about it, except that it was a heaven realm. And then we get into the next basic level, right? And then we've got to start all over again, and now up we go. That's when we finish with our incarnations. Now, it gets slightly more complicated because some people are reincarnates, other people are not reincarnates. Other people are created, their souls are created on this level, and then they continue as eternal beings from this point on. The reincarnates are generally the fallen angels who have been given the opportunity to experience the life that they voted for, if you like. They pushed for this more independence. Okay, buddies, you can have a go at it. And they're being dumped down into human bodies. Now, it takes a lot of incarnations to prepare an angel for a human incarnation. They tell me it's like squeezing a rainbow into a Coke bottle. And then, of course, you have to go through a number of human incarnations, before you finish with it. It's quite a long process. I mean, as I said, this is for me, it's over 500 incarnations so far.
And that's just in this past 203,000 year time period?
Well, yeah, even less than that, actually, because things started, I believe, what I've come to believe is about the time of Atlantis, maybe about 15,000 years BC, at least for this planet, the angels were starting to be given permission to come into human bodies. On other planets, it may have been more advanced. I can't say on that. It's not in my experience. So,
okay.
Atlantis was really a fallen angel deal, if you like. They started as being slaves, believe it or not, and then gradually started taking over because of their intelligence. And Atlantis basically became a center of piracy. And of course, as you know, they were mining gold up in America and shipping it across, and mining tin up in England and shipping it down, which started the whole the whole business with weaponry. Yeah, that was all relatively quite recent.
And so this is when they actually had taken on physical form or incarnated into a body.
Yeah, exactly, yes. The spirits are incarnated into a body. Yeah, because angels don't have souls as we know them. Humans have souls. Mortals have souls. Angels are direct emanations, if you like, of the mother spirit. And they're really created as functional beings. They have their jobs and they do their jobs very well. They're not they're not great on the imagination, and that's why they love and admire us, because we have souls and we have the God that lives inside us. That's why they love us so much. That's why they serve us. That's why they take care of us.
But they do have an awesome sense of humor.
Say again?
I said that, but they do have an awesome sense of humor.
Well, yes, you'd have to, wouldn't you?
I mean, at least the ones that come around me, and it could just be it's
you've
me.
Been watching the human race for the last 500,000 years. You'd have a sense of humor too. You'd have to. Yes, they do. They're wonderfully, they're wonderful creatures. But they're also, they're very stern as well. I mean, it's a very interesting personality type. Of being very open, very soft on the one hand, and very stern, very available to stern when they know, what's right and what's wrong. They're good people.
So why were they here in the first place? I mean, I understand that they came here 203,000 years ago, but why come here? If we were just some backward little planet with these, animals kind of stumbling around, then why come here?
Yes, no, I mean, my spirit was rebelling for a moment. All planets are terribly important. There are hundreds and thousands and thousands of them. We're not on the, we may be galactically on the fringe of, the Milky Way, but then that's irrelevant, to another dimension. They can move from dimension to dimension, snapping their fingers. The Pleiadians who come here, they say it takes us 20 minutes to get here. Most of it's accelerating and decelerating. 20 minutes. So much for the speed of light. Yeah, the speed of light is probably true in third dimension of, third density world, because, we look out into a third density universe. But there's a fourth dimension, which is the dimension of the heart, where everything kind of meets, if you like. Because the fifth dimension is that of the angels, the sixth that of the archangels, and the seventh is that of the divine. But the finer dimensions interpenetrate the grosser dimensions, That's why the angels can perceive us. We can't perceive the angels, because they inhabit a similar, they can see the same things we do, but we can't see them. They move through us.
You mentioned the Pleiades. Do these angels come from the Pleiades, or do they come from somewhere else? And then I have an adjunct question to that. And are we talking about one race of entities, or are we talking about multiple races that make up this group of rebel angels?
Well, one thing at a time.
Okay, sorry, but it would always just coming through my head.
Just have to get the first question by the time you've gotten to the second.
I'll make a note.
Well, let me see. Well, the first thing is no. The guys from we were just talking about
the Pleiades.
Short-term memory, the Pleiades. Yeah, they actually come from a dimension behind the Pleiades, because the Pleiades are fairly recent. On the third dimension they're probably not occupied. Just like Venus on the third dimension is a raging thing, but on the fifth dimension, the one that poor old was it Abdon? What's his name? Was his name the guy back in the 50s who had those ET experiences? Barney?
What, Barney Hill?
No, that was somewhat later. No, that was a genuine ET thing. This is a guy who had all sorts of, very famous, all sorts of ET experiences, and he was taken in a craft up and he went to Venus, and he had a wonderful time on Venus, and when he got back, he told everybody they were, and he was, poo-pooed, because of course we all know Venus is, uninhabitable, dynamo or whatever. But that's only on the third dimension. It's on the fifth dimension, which is where he went. But of course, he wasn't sophisticated enough to understand the dimensional shifts, and our science wasn't sophisticated enough to know how dimensions work. So he comes back and he's poo-pooed. So no, the ETs from what we say the Pleiades actually come from a whole series of planets behind the Pleiades in a higher dimension. But no, the angels basically come from the inner worlds, right? They don't, they're not extraterrestrials. Now, the highest and the highest levels of extraterrestrials get very close to being angels. I mean, they probably travel without their bodies, in their light bodies and stuff like that. We see them occasionally around here. But that's where it gets kind of very, very close. But they don't need to go on and on being mortal beings. That's the point, really. Planets are made for people, so when planets get used up, which most technological planetary societies ultimately do end up using all the planets. They move off into space. They find another planet, and within 100 or 200 years, the planet resuscitates itself. So it goes. It's a big old universe, but it is a learning. It's a teaching machine. It's a university.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the other piece of the question where I asked, or with the fallen angels in particular, or and the best way the word I can use, are we talking about one race of entities? Or are we talking about multiple different kind of groups that formed this rebel angel group society, the Rebel Angel Society?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think there are different clusters within the Rebel Angel community, some probably holding out. And if you look back through history, I think you can see probably some very badly behaved. I think, for instance, the whole Nazi business was an attempt by one section of these Rebel Angels to infiltrate. Once again, it's a learning curve. From our perspective, people do terrible things. From a larger perspective, people do things in order to learn not to do those terrible things. So I don't know. I was once in a situation where it became obvious to me I was surrounded by reincarnated Nazi prison guards, It was extraordinary. I realized that they had been incarnated, and they were also all part of a very repressive cult that I came across in New York. And I realized that that's what they had to go through. They had to be really repressed. So it goes. I mean, I imagine somebody like that who's done something like that would take a number of incarnations to get over it,
So if we experience a big life trauma, it can take us a while to kind of move through that energy?
A big white what? Big white
life trauma?
Yes. Well, it depends how clever one is. And I mean, I was very, very damaged by those damn bombs when I was a child. And it did take me, probably 30 years, I would say, of self-introspection and using LSD, for instance, and using other substances in order to investigate, what went wrong, what twisted me up so badly, And I also went through an English public school education, which it further embedded, problems to the whole thing. So it took a long time, and I thank God for entheogens, that they power plants, that's a gift to us. So we've completely misunderstood, I mean, it's a great shame. Anyway, entheogens are starting to be, reassessed. I think they're starting to come out of the closet because they're important. I mean, they're really helping people, get through this awful thing coming back from war, being completely screwed up. And now they're finding, things like MDMA, is extremely effective, wonderfully effective. So I think one has to use one's intelligence as much as one can in order to, if you like, I ended up very aggressive. I would hit people. It took me a long time to get over that. So because I was hit. So,
hey, Timothy, we need to take a quick break. Okay.
Yes, goodness me, my mouth is getting dry. Thank goodness.
Okay, good. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're here talking to Timothy Wyllie about his book, Revolt of the Rebel Angels, and one of his other ones that I don't have in front of me. And we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the show. We've been here talking to Timothy Wyllie, the author of Rebel Angels in Exile and Revolt of the Rebel Angels. His website is timothywyllie.com. And as always, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can start a new career as a medical intuitive counselor, or certified energy medicine practitioner, where you can learn all of these skills right from the comfort of your own home. So please check out their ongoing training programs. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Timothy, let's see. I guess I should have looked at this before we came back from the break. All right, talked about that.
Well, let me, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was very happy to hear you had mentioned intuition earlier on. That, part of your work is to help people develop intuition, and it's very much at the bottom of what I'm talking about as well. Because we've been trained so much to distrust our intuitions. It's almost, you could almost say, there's a battle between the sort of scientific theory, of provability, and the intuition on the other hand. But earlier cultures, had a much higher understanding of the intuition, and it's more like a muscle, if you like. And as we know, with muscles, if you don't use them, they tend to atrophy. And I think we're trained not to use our intuitions as children. Oh, mommy, I feel this. No, you're wrong. You didn't see this. Blah blah blah. And it goes on and on all the way through our lives. The experts know better than we do. So gradually, we lose our faith in ourselves. And I think we need to regain that. We're a gutsy species, courageous, warm-hearted, loving species, but we're also very violent species as well. Quite rightfully too. We've had a lot to have to sort of battle against in order to come up to where we are. But all these things need to be mastered. We need to master our violence, and we need to master, our want to give ourselves away, to the stronger person, or to, if a woman gives herself away to a man, or a man to a woman, or whatever, we lose our senses in this way. And I think all this is to do with, the lack of intuition. And intuition isn't always right, but at least when it's wrong, it's our mistake. It's not somebody else's mistake. So my feeling is always, good for you for helping with that. It's quite a trail, because there's, of course, an awful lot of things which are sort of blanketed over that, of not trusting oneself. Who am I to know better than, blah, blah, blah. So it goes.
Cool. In your book, this one came out of the Revolt of the Rebel Angels, you, or maybe I should say Georgia, talked about a 200 millennia quarantine. Why were we quarantined? And maybe the better question is, were we, like humanity, quarantined? Were these rebel angels quarantined? Or were we all quarantined? And why?
Right. Yes. This system, of 1,000 planets, right, of which we're one, and of those 1,000 planets, only 37 went into rebellion, and we're one of those 37. Right? So what that quarantine really did was what I call, was the multiverse authorities were saying, okay, you guys, if you want to, play it that way, you go ahead and play it that way, but we're going to quarantine this particular aspect of the universe because we don't want necessarily all this leaking out. It's probably how they justified it. They didn't want the rebellion to spread to other local universes, other local systems. It's rather unfair on the other planets in the system that didn't revolt, but there you go. And what it means really is we're off the routes, we're off the great extraterrestrial routes. I think one has to understand the universe is very highly organized, but it's organized on the inner dimensions. It's not, that's why we don't see them. Because when a spaceship appears and then suddenly disappears, it's not disappearing, it's just moving into another dimension that we can't see with our senses, our senses aren't trained to that particular spectrum. I'm not quite where I was going with that. Can you prompt me?
We were talking about why we were quarantined and, what that all means. Let me kind of ask you kind of a follow-up. Is that why, this kind of makes sense to me, but not at the same time. So is that why we don't really know or understand much of, no, this question doesn't even make any sense in relationship to that.
No, you're exactly right. Which is exactly
what's going on? Okay.
Exactly that, of course. No, we've been quarantined, and we, for thousands of years, we've been thinking that we're the only people in the whole universe. Now we have scientists telling us that. No, it's absurd, of course not. It's a vast enterprise. It's highly organized, very well organized, and compassionately organized as well. So all planets, are basically cultivated, to produce a mortal at the end of the thing, at the end of the evolutionary trail. Most of us, most mortals, as we'll discover, are not Hollywood. Some are a little taller, some are a little shorter, but bipedal is pretty much the most common. It's a good way of getting around. If you've got two hands, some have got three hands, some have got four hands, some have got four legs. But basically, the bipedal, frame is the most common. You could think of it as a family affair. And the idea of meeting somebody from another planet is much like meeting somebody from another land, And it's going to be wonderful when it all opens up again. My God, it's going to be so wonderful. And I'm sure, there'll be some difficulties ahead. There was a little group of breakaways from a Zeta group that, dropped a craft in Germany in, I think, 1935, which got them all going. So they dropped a craft here, a couple of craft, in 1947, I think it was, Roswell, in order to compensate for what... Actually, they dropped a craft earlier than that on the East Coast, I believe in 92, not 92, in 1942. But the Americans didn't make much use of it until at that point. But the Roswell, of course, they absolutely took those crafts to pieces. And a lot of, this explosion of technology that's come out of, the last 50 years is a very direct result of, retro-engineering, the stuff that came out of this craft.
All right, so kind of a weird question. We talked earlier about how the gods taught us agriculture and they taught us stuff, whatever. And now you're mentioning the ship and us reverse engineering it. Do you think that it was given to us so that we could use, our intellect to take that stuff and then progress us forward technologically? So was it, instead of them coming down and saying, here, this is a stick and you can put holes in the ground and put seeds in. They just kind of gave us this technology and just...
Yep, that's exactly right. And I suspect that they gave us the technology because they had this other group had given the Germans that technology earlier on, because the Germans really did make good use of it. I mean, by the end of the war, they had an awful lot going for them. They were very lucky the war ended when it did. So I think probably, the Roswell was the compensation for that. And also, you see, to produce rapid development, you need a degree of conflict. I mean, in order to get we needed the Cold War, basically. So that's how it works on the more primitive planets. You need that sort of that tension, creative tension. On the more sophisticated planets, the tension becomes more of an intellectual creative tension or a spiritual creative tension. It doesn't devolve into violence. But we're a violent lot, or have been. But
how
my
do you...
best
Go ahead.
information is that the court action, essentially, that was taken has been sort of settled about 25 or 30 years ago. I think probably in the early 80s. I think my best information was that a sort of something was put out on the levels, and some of your listeners might be interested in this, in that a number of people were sort of given a bit of more information than most of us have about the Lucifer rebellion, and they were asked basically in their souls whether they would forgive Lucifer, or whether they would want Lucifer to be exterminated, which is one side of the situation was. And I think this produced a situation where the gates gradually started to be opening, and they opened again. And I think we're now seeing many more extraterrestrials, and I think from what I understand of the angel community, the angels have been much more active. I mean, it's in their interest to contact us at this particular point. They want to contact us. It's just that we have so much kerfuffle, and disbelief and erroneous thinking that prevents us from really, being able to make that little jump. I mean, it has been going on a long time. I mean, people have been trying to talk to angels for eons, and well and do.
Excuse me. How do other extraterrestrials fit into this whole thing? You hear people talking about the Greys or the Nordics or the ones that look like praying mantises. How do they fit into this whole thing, or do they?
Yes, they do. This planet has become a very, very important little planet. Not only is it very unusual for a planet to be isolated in the way that we've been, but it's also for spiritual reasons, that the incarnation of the dominant spiritual figure in this local universe, his seventh incarnation, he has to incarnate in a lifetime in each one of his levels of the an archangel and an angel, the various different levels. And the seventh of his incarnations, the final one, was an incarnation as a human being, was as Jesus Christ, as Joshua ben Joseph. And that makes this planet a very, very important one, because he has 10 million planets under his sway, so he chose this planet for his final incarnation. That makes it extremely interesting for a whole lot of other people. And there are a number of different reports in terms of how many extraterrestrial species. Some say, I've heard, some say 55. I've heard, I think Billy Myers says something like 79 or something like that. I've heard over 300 in some reports. So we're putting a lot of interest here. So yeah, you get your various different shapes and sizes. For us, it's a bit like going to a country, like Nigeria or something. Our first day in Nigeria, all we're meeting is Nigerians. And then the second day we realize there are two dominant tribes there. They're very, very different. Then we go out into the hinterlands and we realize there are hundreds of tribes, all with very, very different ideas. And that's the way it is with extraterrestrials, they've all got different agendas. On the whole, the good aspect of it cancels out the bad aspect of it. As we've seen, the bad aspect of him was the Zeta Reticulus, the guys, and they were a small breakaway group that did the German thing. And then, there's another group, for instance, that, is doing some interbreeding. But most groups basically observe. They don't intervene. They observe. Although there was a certain amount of intervention. I was told, I was very lucky, back in the 1960s, I bumped into an extraterrestrial. And I won't go into the whole story of it, but basically what he says is we can pick the rockets out of the sky just like that. We can pick the rockets out of the... So, to think that we really survived the Cold War, two insane nations battling each other, and we didn't manage to get rid of each other, I think probably we had a lot of help. And I didn't, I lived on that because I was terribly worried, back in the 50s and 60s that we were all going to kill each other with these ridiculous bombs. So we were all worried about that back in England. I don't know what it was like over here. We knew if you ducked your head down, that didn't really help when a bomb was going off. We knew that. We knew what bombs did. So then, of course, the 90s came along and began leaking out that, UFOs were seen over, these bombs, and they were turning stuff off and turning, So, yeah, they were pretty involved. And that's quite apart from what the government might be doing. I mean, goodness knows what's going on there. That's a whole other story.
Well, and I have a question about that coming up, so just be prepared.
Yeah, good.
The Watchers. So, all right, let me phrase this question differently. So there is the group or whatever that I believe that we look at as God of the Bible, which I don't believe was like God. I think it was some kind of extraterrestrial or possibly one of these watchers or angels that humanity interacted with. What's your thought on that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. No, it certainly wasn't the God of our hearts. We know that. It was an entity that they call Caligastia, who I suppose is the nearest thing we can get to a real baddie. He was basically the angel, and he wasn't a very high angel, but the angel in charge of this planet, if you like. There were two angels basically in charge. They were the two who came down originally, 500,000 years ago. They were the head of that that mission, the Prince Caligastia. So he really became the sort of bête noire. And I suspect very much that the God of the Old Testament was Caligastia, because the personality is exactly the same. A jealous God, an angry, discipline, listen to me, no other God but me. All that stuff is pure, arrogant Caligastia. That isn't the God of our hearts, And I suspect, quite a lot of the other gods that have come and gone, were mentioned, probably fall into the same thing. We have this God that lives in our hearts. I know it lives in our hearts, it lives somewhere inside us, that makes us all extremely special and very much valued, as I said, by the angels. And this is part of who we are, that we take up with us when we ascend. We're children of God.
We're all children of God.
Yeah. And interesting enough, whether we're men or women, we're all sons of God, and the angels are all daughters of God, whether they're male or female. And the angels, obviously, they're not sexual. They don't procreate, but they do have leanings. You know, some lean towards the male, you know, a bit more aggressive. Some lean towards the female. You know, so it's more of a characteristic on that level.
Well, then I don't know that it would be very fun if to be an angel if you don't get to practice procreating.
It's much more fun to be deposited into a human body. Yeah, there are about 100.
I don't know about that. Sometimes I go, well, what was I thinking?
It's got its ups and its downs. There are about 120 million of us down here right now, and more coming in every day is what Georgie.
120 million.
Yeah.
What? 120 million what?
Incarnate rebel angels, who are, you know, human beings who don't know that they're angels. They think they're different. They can't quite understand why nobody understands why their parents are this. And, you know, some of them, you know, go into more freeze modes, you know, and you get the mental problems. Some go for a quick incarnation, you know, they get into a body of a little African boy, you know, dies of something or other at the age of 4, you know. It's a quick incarnation. Yeah. Come back again quick, I'm sure. Everybody wants to be here right now. You know, because we're ending the end of the cycle, and those people who haven't really pulled their socks up, you know, are really looking to incarnate, to really get it together. You know, it's not going to go on much longer.
I mean, are there any signs or, I'm going to say, symptoms that you can use to identify if you are one of these rebel angels incarnate in a body?
There are very broad symptoms, if you like, that, you know, don't apply to everybody. And also, I mean, if I was to say they're intensely creative, that's not to say that you won't find human beings who are also intensely creative. But there is a whole series of things, a feeling of not being understood, of not even being human in some cases, you know. Often, you know, you find one in a family, you know, of normal people. You know, you might find, you know, odd eating instincts. They're probably very close to animals. They probably love animals more than human beings, if you really ask them. And it depends where they're at in their whole cycle. Some will go into villainy in order to, you know, do bad things in order to stop doing that. And others will go into being very do-gooders, you know, in order to help other people. I mean, I'm more on that, I guess, you know, if I write my books to help people. So it depends, but also when I grew up, I was well on the way to villainy. You know, growing up in an English public school, the only way of existing was to outwit the damn people, you know, which wasn't much appreciated.
So how did you come to find out that you were one of these angels incarnate?
Oh, God, well, I'm coming up to 75 years old. I've been around the sun 75 times. And I guess by the time I was 50, I was pretty sure that something really weird was going on. You know, I didn't know whether I was from the future or I was from another planet or something. I knew I wasn't a human being. And then I guess Georgia basically kind of put the whole thing in perspective. And I came to understand through her, you know, what was going on. Because, you know, she's either waiting, I mean, she's dying to become a human being. She'd love to become a human being. But I'm not entirely sure whether she's actually kind of riding on me. She's kind of jockeying on me in a sense, so she doesn't have to. I don't know yet where she's going on this. We haven't finished our work together. There's another 3 or 4 books.
Just another 3 or 4 books. Well, we already talked about that. There are many who contend that ETs control humanity. And so I'm going to change this, you know, because we're talking about angels. And so but I'll use the ET word here to imply that. But there are many that contend that ETs control humanity, be it the Watchers, the Reptilians, or some other group. What do you think about that whole concept? I mean, do you think that these rebel angels are still trying to control what's happening on the planet?
No. Nobody controls humanity in that sense. We're basically let to go, to do our thing, and sometimes our thing isn't so great and sometimes it is great. But no, nobody controls us in that sense. We can be controlled by people. We can offer ourselves up to be controlled, by a government, by, a pack leader, somebody we admire a lot, a husband or wife who can be controlled. But no, humanity isn't controlled at all. I imagine that probably even extraterrestrials who'd like to have a bit more control, because I'm sure that our exploding these thermonuclear devices probably have a very negative effect on the contiguous dimensions. I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine an H-bomb is not going to have an effect on the fourth dimension. So they've got quite a lot of, they've got some reason for, I won't say controlling us, but perhaps helping us avoid us doing our worst, put it that way. Because there's no benefit to anybody, for a race to exterminate itself. I mean, nobody learns, nobody gains. I don't think the kids in a schoolroom, would be permitted to burn down the schoolhouse. It's not the sensible stuff. So I think that's the way it works.
Okay. I mean, because you mentioned Hitler before and, some kind of manipulation happening out of that whole encounter. And so that wasn't due to some of these angels trying to, I'm going to say, act out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess anybody of a certain personality who thinks they're absolutely right has some sort of urge to make sure everybody else feels they're absolutely right, is absolutely right, or she's absolutely right too. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. I mean, we've seen it all the way through the world. I think we're looking at probably ISIS. I think probably at this point has a lot of rebel angel incarnates in it. It wouldn't surprise me at all, on the dark side of it all. Because it is, there's a dark side to it and a light side to it. I mean, most of us are here to redeem ourselves, are wise enough to realize, that, that we have to pull our socks up, we have to pull ourselves together and, and play the game, I guess. But, we're bringing a lot to the party as well. I mean, one of the interesting things is they tell us that when we die, right, and we move on, we're of immense interest to other mortals on other planets, right, who've also died, but who we meet on those levels, because they haven't been through what we've been through. And they're aghast, and apparently they love hearing all the stories about what we went through and all the fights and all the love and things like that, because they didn't have that, And the other side of it is very strange. There's a committee of, I think, 24 really very senior entities who die and move up, I guess, people we would recognize historically. And this is a committee that essentially takes care of all these, all the inhabited planets in this particular system, which is 650, 670. And they basically officiate on a level of, listen, we've been there, we've lived. And what's interesting is all 24 of those beings have come from this planet. Isn't that extraordinary? I find that really interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess there's a book in the making for you on the other side.
Oh, what are you telling me, Rita?
Well, write it now, and then email it to yourself in a different dimension so that you'll have it.
I don't know. I hope I'll be learning more than writing. I mean, these books I've been writing with Georgia, right? People, I mean, anybody who's written a book will know what this means. We wrote 8 books in 2 years.
Oh my God!
I mean, these are substantial books in 2 years. I mean, I can tell from my speech probably that I really did burn myself out of it. I mean, I had to stop after 8. We were working, 18, 20-hour days. It was ridiculous. But there you go. When you work for the angels, you've got to work at their speed, I guess.
Oh, I'm hearing you. I mean, they'll say to me, it's like, okay, you need to do this. And I'll be like, okay, so what am I doing? And then they'll tell me. And then they'll go, oh, and it has to be done like next week. It's like, really? Really? You couldn't like give me a heads up on this before, or that it wouldn't be this rush job?
But what is strange is you found you're up to it. Yes, you find you.
Well, that's after I kind of bitch and moan about it first, though.
A waste of energy, but there you go.
It's. I like to say it's a Jewish thing. We got to kvetch about it, and then it's all good. Then I just go do it.
Well, yeah. I guess all of our races, we have our different methods. We English people put on a real stiff lip, and try and ignore it. That's our way of dealing with it.
Timothy, what happens once the quarantine is lifted, both for the rebel angels that have been trapped here on the earth or around the earth, as well as for the people on earth? I mean, because we're really talking about 2 different groups.
Well, yeah, but of course they're intertwined as well. We're all on the same side in that sense. This is a great enigma, of course, and I am not going to say with any definitive this is what's going to happen, because I have absolutely no idea. But one thing I do know is that whatever I come up with, it will not be nearly as smart as what God can come up with. So I don't even bother to come up with anything. But what I'd love to see happening is what I call the big show, right? Which is something, which is everybody coming together, right? It's everybody, the angels and the extraterrestrials, and the year party, everybody partying all together again, and that would be just wonderful, wouldn't it? Just wonderful.
Do you think the veil? Oh, that would be so cool.
Yeah, and we'd all relax. Oh my God, what have we doing? Trying. We're part of a big family. People know more than we do about how to put this in right. I'm sure however polluted our oceans could be, extraterrestrials could put in a technology that could clean those oceans up in half an hour, I'll bet.
Do you think the veil for us, and our ability to see the spirit world or higher dimensions, whatever word you want to use there, will be lifted?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I mean, at this point in time, as human beings in the third dimension, we have limited access, or we have to meditate or have a near-death experience or whatever to really come in contact with higher dimensional beings, what's going on higher levels of consciousness, higher vibrations of reality. And, and there are many people that refer to that as the veil. And so do you think that when the quarantine is lifted, that veil will get lifted as well, and we'll be able to interact with beings that are not of our energetic vibration here on the third dimensional plane?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think, to think of it, because you see, we contain all these dimensions. We're called a third density planet, which is also a third dimensional planet, a 3D planet, because the first dimension is that of the rocks, the second is that of the vegetation, the third is that of the animals, the fourth is the human, fifth, angel, sixth. So, we're in the middle of all this, right? We're the heart of it all, right? And our task, if you like, that we have presented ourselves with is how to master these various different dimensions. So the first dimension is mastering basically survival, you know. So once you've mastered survival, then you get on to, you know, the second, which is, you know, reproduction, right, or growing plants or whatever, you know. And then the third is the dimension of power, of exerting power, and either being powerful or being, you know, being screwed over by someone, you know, being on the other side of it. But the idea of, you know, understanding how these various dimensions work, you know, then once we've done that, you know, we can move into the heart. Now, we are simultaneously in all these dimensions, you know, at the same time. It's just that our senses and our, you know, what we need to learn is focused on one dimension or another. So, for instance, you'll find, you know, a guy who's completely, you know, devoted to, you know, finding women to you know, to make out with. You know, we could say they're stuck in the second chakra. They're stuck in the sex. You know, they haven't mastered their own sexual dynamism yet. You know, or you might find somebody, you know, in business who is just absolutely, you know, enthralled by power and their own power. You know, so they haven't got over that. You know, they're just they're stuck in power. You know, we have to learn how to give up power as well as being able to claim power in order to move to the heart. You know, once we're in the heart, I think it's cool. So no, I don't think that we'll lose anything. I think probably it would be such an intense relief if that we're all part of the same family. You know, we're not, you know, all these various different religious, you know, ideas all opposing one another. It's a much larger frame than that. You know, and I think basically we just create opposition. You know, we project the worst side of ourselves onto another person, make them the enemy. I mean, it's just a basic human thing that we all do. And we do it as nations as well. You know, we make a nation, you know, absolutely awful in order to justify attacking them. All this sort of thing will, I think, drop away. It won't be necessary anymore. And then we'll look to the people, you know, different understandings and different, you know, ways of looking at the world, and we'll look at them with love and understanding and compassion, as one hopes they will look at us. I mean, it's not very difficult to treat people as one wishes to be treating oneself. It's not rocket science.
Well, for some, it seems that way.
Well, as I say, it's a learning curve.
You know, I mean, I think it's so much easier when you can get into your heart. But when you're in that lower part of your body, in the lower chakras, I think it would be challenging.
Well, yes. I mean, you know, one can move in and out of the heart, you know, even if one is stuck in one of the lower chakras. But to be able to master the chakras, meaning that one can move in and out of these different ways of being much more flexibly, you know, than being stuck in a particular way of being, you know. Somebody in business, you know, assumes a particular persona and then, you know, comes to believe that he is that persona. He or she is that persona, which of course is a real killer. You know, because we're not like personas. Personas are merely a socialized way of, you know, handling other people.
That's cool. I mean, I just have these visions of kind of this ascension, you know, or kind of like the Left Behind thing, except, you know, it's the people that are able to connect with, you know, their source, or, you know, as you're saying, your fourth chakra that will, you know, ascend to a higher vibration or will be transformed so that they can interact with these higher dimensional energies that were being blocked from before. So that'd be really awesome to me.
Yes. I mean, I can't guarantee that there might be a few people out there who, oh, no, I'm not going to be any part of this. Well, you know, that's life. But I think on the whole, even the hardest-hearted person will melt when they see, you know, what could be the most extraordinary performance, you know. Extraterrestrials, all in their various different crafts. I did a drawing once out of my window. I called it One Spring Morning, and I thought there's about 150 UFOs in the sky, all different shapes, and they're just hanging over the valley. And I think to myself, well, waking up one morning and seeing that, my God, wouldn't that move the heart? You know? And they weren't aggressive. They were just beautiful, you know. Anyway, I don't want to be too pie in the sky because I don't think we're there yet. You know, we've got some stuff to go through before then. But it's, you know, I think we'll see it in our lifetimes. You know.
And that would be great. What do you think about the people that make these reports about having, and I'm going to use the abduction scenario concept, you know, where they believe that they have been abducted and they have a negative encounter? Because from my understanding and people that I've talked to, there is a whole contingency that actually have a relatively positive experience with these extraterrestrials. And then there's a group that do not have positive, you know, they have terrifying experiences. Any comment on that idea? Would they be another group that's in quarantine?
From what I've researched and encountered, and I've known a few of these people, it's very much to do with how they react, if you like, and the support they get afterwards. In my experience, most abductees, sooner or later, come to realize that it was a beneficial experience. But of course, you know, you can get a lot of time on telly and things like that. You know, if you make it all sound dreadful. Personally, the ones that I've known, especially a Spanish boy, I know he had a wonderful time. He wasn't, you know, probed and he was treated like a king. I loved him. And also a woman I know who's had, I think, 2 or 3 children up there. She's also treated relatively well as well. So I think that sure, the abductions do go on. I'm sure there are exaggerated ones. I'm sure there are delusionary ones, but there is certainly enough that I've come across, and certainly, you know, a lot of people have come across that are deeply authentic. And, you know, poor old Dr. Mack, you know, I mean, he was he was doing good work on there, and then some woman got in there, you know, and made up a whole story, and of course, everybody poo-poos him, you know. It's kind of sad, you know, but yeah, he was onto it. But what I found out in my experience is almost all of those abductions occur in family lines. In other words, you know, the grandfathers and before then. So it's part of a process. And a number of them even could consider themselves actually of extraterrestrial ilk. You know, they'd made some sort of contract before they came in. They wouldn't have remembered it. So I think that's also part of it, because, you know, there are no victims in the spiritual world. We're all responsible for ourselves, and we're all responsible for what happens to us. Not only what we do, but what happens to us is also our responsibility, as well as the responsibility of whatever the other people are doing. You know, so taking from that viewpoint, I would say that people who complain about it and who bemoan about it are probably, you know, in process of learning, right? That's just, that's an emotional reaction. I felt so invaded. But, you know, I mean, if you go to a doctor, they invade you too, you know? It's just that you remember that one. You just don't remember having made the contract before you came in. You know, so there you go.
Well, why do they make it so that we don't remember stuff? Or, I mean, because you're having very conscious contact with this angel, and there are people that, you know, I'm going to say channel information. Why do you think there isn't a consensus of material that is coming through, which I think for some people is one of the biggest gripes?
It entirely depends who you're talking about when you say coming through, because every, and I include myself in this, obviously, if you read my books carefully, I'm sure you could find, you know, biases that come from me. Now, I've spent an awful long time clearing myself out, and I think probably quite a lot of people who do channeling aren't really prepared you know, in the best way to do it, and they bring a lot of themselves to it. I remember being at a conference and somebody was channeling a French, well, that French, well, I can't remember his name. People are always talking about him, one of the big old things. So I asked the person a question in French, and she didn't understand it. You know, so you also get people like that, you know, who believe they're channeling somebody, but they're really not. You know, they're part of themselves or something like that. But I think by working collaboratively, I'd like to think I avoid the worst of my own impositions, of my own suppositions that I bring to the party.
But it sounds like you're more having a conversation. I mean, to me, there's a big difference between channeling and having a conversation. I love having conversation. I'll go, well, what about this? And they'll go, no, don't do that, or they'll give me guidance or whatever, but I don't consider that channeling. Exactly. And it sounds like you do the same thing.
Yes, it's taken a long time, and it's very easy just to shut one's eyes and channel. I mean, it's pretty easy. What I do, I remember at the thing in 1987, I remember in New York City, I found myself, Quetzalcoatl insisted on coming through. And I felt so awkward about it because about 3,000 people all around there, and there I was, standing up, and I had to say, Quetzalcoatl was telling me, and then I would say what it was, and now he's telling me, and I would say what it was. And that way I kind of got around the sort of the awkwardness of, is he inhabiting my body, what's going on here, which raises all sorts of weird questions, I call it overwriting. I feel when I write more directly with angels, which I do with my own books, I feel they can overlight me. They stand behind me, and when I write something that is, simpatico with their way of thinking, I get this kind of lovely little kind of shiver up my spine of pleasure. I got it right. So that's another way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, my first book, I think, the Helian's proposition actually came through in one. That was automatic writing. And that came through in one fell swoop, 6-hour stretch of writing. Yeah.
You must write really fast.
No, I don't. No, I don't. No, not at all. First thing, I'm not a trained typist. I grew up in England. I'm still pecking away at the thing. But no, I set out to write a book every 10 years, about the impact that the invisible world was having on this planet. And those were the 3 books that I wrote, it came out in 1984, the first book, and then the second book came out in 1992, and then the third came out in 2010. So those are the 3 books, basically, I got. And I thought, I'm this. I wasn't going to chop down any more trees. And then Georgia comes along. Oh, dear me. Yeah. I shouldn't be like that. I mean, I've loved it. I think incredibly invaluable amount of information. I couldn't be happier about it, but it was exhausting. Anyway, I'm not going to bitch and moan about that.
Okay. So we have about 3 minutes left. What's coming up for you? What's next on your agenda? I know that you have your one book, The Wisdom of the Watchers, that is coming out, but we're going to have you come back on and we'll talk about that book.
Ooh, good. But I think that's the best yet. I mean, that's the best of George's book yet. And then the next one's coming out next year, so we can do that as well. But this is a good one. Yeah, I like it. What's coming out? I'm off to the East Coast. I have an art partner. We draw together, but we create these things by sending the drawing backwards and forwards between Maine and New Mexico. Adding little bits to these drawings, and I think there's probably a couple in one of the books that you're looking at. It's a contemplation basically on the nature of God, the goddess basically. I think we've done 10 or 11 together. So I'm going out there. I've been working on a movie about a period of my life when I was with a mystery school for about 13 years. And the movie's just been made of that, which is just coming out now. And I think it's hitting the circuit in San Francisco.
Okay, but who plays you in the movie?
No, it's not. It's a documentary, thank God. It's a documentary. But he's very, very hip. He's so clever. He's an English lad called Neil something or other. I'm sorry. But it's very, I don't know if you watch documentaries these days, but there's a new kind of documentary coming out, which is really hip and fun and, wonderful music and everything. And we had some very interesting people involved with us. Funkadelic, for instance, was a big supporter of us. It's a fascinating little documentary. I think it'll do very well. And then what happens? And then I'm writing my own book. Actually, I really wanted to write a book of my own again after writing with Georgia. So I'm writing a book basically what it's like to live with angels, and how we all basically live with angels without knowing it. And we can look back over our lives and examine the various different incidents that happened that we really have no understanding of, and look at it from the perspective of, well, how did an angel involved in that? I mean, I got pulled out of a crashing car when I was 17. I had no idea. The car was actually pancaked. But because I had swerved to avoid somebody, who was doing something even really stupid, I was pulled out of the car together with a girlfriend on the other side. And anyone who knows a de chevaux, those little de chevaux, knows those side windows really about 6 inches big. It's a mystery. And then years and years later, I was told that I'd been pulled out by a couple of what are called midway creatures. These are midway angels, halfway vibrationally between our vibration and the seraphic vibration. And they are the only ones that can manifest. Angels can't manifest, basically. They can watch us, they can see us, but they can't interact with us. They can't manifest. But these midway creatures can manifest. And they're the ones that kind of, help out, they can actually physically appear. They can physically mess around with this reality.
Timothy?
And of course, yes.
So I'm looking at the clock and our time is up. So we're going to have to pick up this conversation when you come on next time.
Oh, what fun. I'd love to do that. Dr. Rita, you're a marvel. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions.
Well, you are so welcome. And thank you for coming on and kind of starting over again with me. And, this was great. I had a great time with you. So, yay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. You're welcome. Bye, Timothy.
Goodbye.
That's Timothy Wyllie. His book is Revolt of the Rebel Angels, as well as Rebel Angels in Exile. His webpage is timothywyllie.com. And next week, we have Dr. Amit Goswami coming back on talking about quantum economics. Till next time, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.